Yesterday, you could file a lawsuit over a sexual assault in New York State no matter how long ago it happened. Today, you can't. That's because the Adult Survivors Act expired at midnight. The act was a special exemption to the statute of limitations on sexual abuse cases in the state, but it was only open for 1 year. With last night's deadline looming, cases were filed against high-profile figures like New York Mayor Eric Adams, Sean P. Diddy Combs, Axl Rose, and Jamie Foxx. The law also enabled E. Jean Carroll's case against Donald Trump. The total number of suits filed was estimated to be upwards of 2,500. Susan Crumiller is a New York attorney specializing in sexual abuse cases and the co-founder of the Survivors Law Project, which seeks to see the Adult Survivors Act reinstated. We reached her in Brooklyn.
Susan, the door that was open to survivors yesterday is now closed. So what will that mean for people in New York State now?
So our hope is that the window will be reopened. And there are legislators who are talking about that as a serious possibility. And of course, we're advocating very strongly for the window to be reopened. But as of now, it means that survivors, adult survivors, whose claims are otherwise time barred because the assault happened too long ago, if they didn't file during the window period that's now closed, it means that they are no longer able to file.
What message does it send to survivors when you have a door like that close?
I think one main reason that a lot of survivors didn't file in the window is because they didn't know about it. And so it's very frustrating for them when they hear later on that there was this window and they had this opportunity that they didn't know about. We saw this also with the Child Victim Act, where we still get calls from survivors of child sex abuse who didn't know that they had this opportunity to bring their claims that was now gone. It's tough because, before the window opened, these survivors thought that justice was unavailable to them. And they were right. And so once the window closes again, for some who never knew about it, it just came and went unnoticed. But then people who find out about it too late, it can be very, very difficult.
We often hear about the length of time it can take for people to come forward. Why is it important to have a wider time period for people to be able to tell their stories?
Statute of limitations in general are designed to protect wrongdoers or people accused of wrongdoing. In other words, we have the right to move on with our lives and not worry that someone will come after us for something we did 20 years ago. It's very sound logic when it comes to things like a breach of contract or a slip and fall, where people experience something and then they decide what to do and then they move on. But sexual abuse, people process trauma differently. It takes time. It takes years often, sometimes decades, for survivors to even recognize what happened to them, let alone to feel that pursuing legal action is necessarily the right step for them. So I think that as a society, we need to just better understand that the traditional model of statute of limitations doesn't work for sex abuse. We need a different model, and we need to decide that we value the voices of survivors and survivors' right to seek justice more than we value the offender's right to move on from what they've done.
Do you have a sense, based on the influx of cases leading up to the deadline, that there's a different kind of understanding and maybe a higher likelihood of a shift to the kind of model you were talking about there?
I certainly hope so. I don't like to speculate with respect to specific legislative actions, but I certainly hope that other states will follow suit. I think New York was only the second state to open this type of window for adult survivors as opposed to child survivors. And I think we've seen how important it is, a chance for survivors today to hold their perpetrators accountable we're living in a different world now than we used to. And the shame and stigma is still there. The fear is still there, but it's not prohibitive in the way that it used to be.
As we mentioned in our introduction, and we've certainly been seeing over the last several weeks and days, lawsuits being filed against very high-profile men, politicians, celebrities. Those make the headlines, certainly. But are they typical of the type of claims being filed over the past year?
I wouldn't say they're atypical, but, for every high-profile case, there are countless cases of sex abuse against marginalized individuals. Prison abuse is extremely common, and I believe actually the majority of the cases filed have been on behalf of prisoners, certainly a very large portion. And we have filed some cases on behalf of prisoners ourselves. This is the type of abuse that goes unnoticed and is so widespread. These cases of disenfranchised, marginalized populations where abusers just think they can get away with it. I mean, that's sort of the common thread often with celebrities and with these powerful institutions, is that they truly don't think anyone is powerful enough to stand up for them. They understand how scary they are. As celebrities are well-resourced, well-heeled. They understand that making public accusations against them is extremely daunting. So that same logic applies to protect institutions as well as celebrities, but we don't hear about those cases as much.
Certainly, I would imagine a large number of the cases involve women, but I think it's also important to stress that it's probably not only women that are coming forward.
Absolutely. We file cases regularly on behalf of male survivors, and we're very proud to. Men are survivors, non-binary individuals are survivors, and I think it's always important to note that transgender individuals are by far at the greatest risk of sexual violence.
Susan, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for your attention to this issue.
Susan Crumiller is an attorney and the co-founder of the Survivors Law Project. We reached her in Brooklyn, New York.